Welcome to today's episode of the Simply Financial Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Calandra, and I'd like to increase your financial IQ with today's episode about estate planning. A little bit of a different focus, though. A lot of the information out there, including episodes we've done on this show, typically focus on how to, the wills, the trusts, the beneficiaries, the realities of 10-year IRA distributions when you're a beneficiary, things like that. But the whom part can be challenging. Who you leave your money to can be very challenging. So my opinion is, first off, getting straight into it, is to focus on your own values. In thinking about who you want to leave money to, you want to reflect on your journey, your own individual challenges and accomplishments. Going through this exercise can often help you prioritize what your values are and bring you closer to a decision, especially if it's tricky, on who you might want to leave money to. Next, I think you consider how you define your family. For nuclear families like mine, it can be rather straightforward. Nuclear family, you have a spouse, you have children. There's something called sort of a sweetheart estate plan, which is if something happens to me, I leave all my money to my spouse. If my spouse passes away with me or predeceases me, then all the money goes to the children and it goes equally. That's nice, neat, tidy, pretty straightforward. And if you're in this boat and you're listening to this, you might think that the rest of this is sort of unnecessary thinking and strategizing. In reality, though, in today's America, it's often more complicated than that. If you are unmarried, that's a good example. Another one is if you have no children, but you're married, who do you leave the money to? If you have ex-spouses or stepchildren or a second marriage and you have children from the first, that's when things become a little more, I keep using the word challenging, to think things through on who you would want to leave money to. And then we could get into beneficiaries, trusts, what you say in your will. But first has to be how you would want your money distributed, who you'd want your beneficiaries to be if something happened to you. So the definition of family isn't always clear cut. You might have nieces, nephews, cousins that might be worth considering, maybe with your children, or maybe because you don't have children. You might have non-family members, close friends, unmarried partner, longtime caregiver. These can be people that you might want to leave money to after you pass away. Another element, which is more for people that are wealthy, maybe even significantly wealthy, is to think about the next generation. Instead of leaving money to your children, to have plans to leave money to your grandchildren, to skip over your children and get the money directly to the grandchildren, or maybe even future generations that haven't even been born yet. These are all things that could be carried out if that's what your values are calling for you to do. The last element of this is charitable intentions. Many people decide to leave money to charity after their death. It could be their alma mater, like the school they went to, could be charities that are important to them. Maybe they served on the board. Maybe the charity helped them or their family in a time of need. Charitable intentions plays into all of this. If you're single and unmarried and not in a committed relationship, then you don't have to accommodate anyone. You don't have to negotiate with anyone. You could do what you want in these things. If you're in a relationship, married or otherwise, there can be disagreements or at the very least difference of opinions. And this all needs to get worked through. My situation, as I already said, is a nuclear family, pretty straightforward between my wife, Joelle, and I. So we did talk through everything to make sure we were on the same page. And we even have in our estate plan contingencies. If something happened to Joelle and I and my two children at the same time, then what would we want to have happen to our wealth? The next layer down, it's extremely unlikely that actually would happen, but we do have that built into our estate plan. So these are some of the things that you would want to think about when you're putting together your estate plan, not just the nuts and bolts of, I need a will, I might want trust, who I name, I need beneficiaries, but also who you want to have inherit your money. One thing I haven't talked about, which can be incredibly sensitive, is times when families have become estranged from one another. You might have a family that has a couple that has 3 children, grown children, but they don't speak with one of them. These can be sad circumstances. It could be disappointing, upsetting, stressful for everybody involved. A key question is, do you include that estranged child from the estate plan, or do you divide it equally between the 3, or do you come up with some other calculation on how you want to include him or her? These are very, very personal decisions, but they need to be thought through. One key thing I want to mention here is, if you're listening to this and you're stressing out, don't be stressed out. This can all be changed. You could set up an estate plan and a will, and then 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, you might want to make a change. You might want to leave 10% to a charity, only later decide you want to go to 0, or take it from 10 to 20. Those changes can be made at very little cost, typically, and not a lot of hassle, because you're only making adjustments to the mainstay of what the plan is. So you're not making permanent decisions if you don't want them to be. This is all changeable, and again, usually at low cost, low hassle. The last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up is this concept of, you want to treat people fairly, I think. Usually people go through this and they want to be fair. They want to do the right thing by themselves as well as their loved ones, however they define it. Equal doesn't necessarily mean equitably. There are times when you might decide that you want to leave more to one person as opposed to another person because of their own life circumstances. A classic example is, if you have a couple of children, let's say 2, and one of them has special needs, a disability of some sort, you may decide not to do 50-50 in that circumstance. You may decide to do something different for the child with disabilities, recognizing that is an equitable solution, even though it might not be an equal solution. If you have children, if you have different loved ones and you're trying to figure out how to deal with them on any number of things, you don't necessarily deal with everybody the same way, even though you're trying to deal with them fairly and do the right thing. I think that comes into play here as well. So that's a word to the wise. I think if you're listening to this and you're thinking about your estate plan or changes to your estate plan, go back to the beginning of what I talked about. Establish what your values are. Define how you think about your family, and consider who, including entities, that you might want to leave money to, and figure out a division. Then you could go to your financial professionals, your attorneys, to figure out how to carry out your wishes. And once again, remember that this is changeable. What might be right today at 45 is likely to be different at 55 and likely to be different at 65. So keep in mind that this is changeable, will unfold and evolve over time, and that's natural. So thanks for listening to today's episode. Subscribe to the Simply Financial podcast if you haven't done so already. I will be back with you on another episode of the Simply Financial podcast very soon. Have a great day.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of Osaic Wealth, Inc., and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Please note, the information being provided is strictly as a courtesy. When you link to any of the websites provided here, you are leaving this website. We make no representation as to the completeness or accuracy of information provided at these websites. Nor is the company liable for any direct or indirect technical or system issues, or any consequences arising out of your access to or your use of third-party technologies, websites, information, and programs made available through this website. When you access one of these websites, you are leaving our website and assume total responsibility and risk for your use of the websites you are linking to. Securities and advisory services are offered through Osaic Wealth, Inc., member FINRA, SIPC. Insurance services offered through Elliott Wealth Management Services, LLC, not affiliated with Osaic Wealth, Inc.